A phenomenon that you will encounter if you spend any time in the online Sanskrit community is the absolute glazing and worship of Pāṇini as some kind of grammar god. Now, don't get me wrong, the Ashtadhyayi is a wonderful text. It's an ingenious text, right? To condense the entire grammar of such a complex language into a book that is no more than 20 pages long when you print it out, that is an incredible feat. But that text still contains errors. For all of its wondrous condensation, it is still filled with errors, and Pāṇini is still wrong when it comes to a various number of topics. And no, or very few people on the internet really wish to admit that at all. Most people will try to make excuses for Pāṇini. They will say that it's only in his dialect, in a bunch of other stuff that just doesn't make any sense. Of course, the greatest example, the most egregious example of Pāṇini just being blatantly wrong are his rules for the past tenses, for lung and for lit specifically. Now, lung lakara is the most common, the most just go-to past tense in Sanskrit. If you've learnt Sanskrit to any degree, you will probably have learnt lung lakara. It's just a really distinctive part of Sanskrit. And Pāṇini's rules for lung lakara are that you can only use it if the action you're describing happened more than a day ago, and if you have witnessed the action. And he's very clear about this. There can be no doubt. This is what he means. But this rule is simply not followed by anyone. There does not exist a single extant text that follows this rule in any fashion whatsoever. People simply do not care, and they use lung lakara as a general past tense, as they always have, from the oldest, most ancient parts of the Rig Veda all the way to the most modern texts. People have always used lung lakara as a general past tense, regardless of if they have witnessed the actions or not. So, we can only conclude that Pāṇini is wrong here. Now, the most common rebuttal to this is that it's somehow only in his dialect that lung lakara was used like this, but this doesn't make any sense. The Ashtadhyayi has references to various other regions, and Pāṇini himself writes that in the east they consider this grammatical formation to look like this, and in the north they consider this. So he knows of various other grammatical traditions, and he must know of other dialects. And the very fact that he tries to document these other dialects shows that he is writing a work that is meant to encompass all of Sanskrit, not just his dialect. Still, though, he does not write about this usage of lung, even though it most definitely was the way lung was used during his time. We have it in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which are both texts that definitely existed in some form or other during Pāṇini's time. Thus, we can only conclude that Pāṇini was making this rule up because this is how he thought the lung lakara should be used, not how it was used, which is prescriptivism. And it's really annoying to me when people continue to just say this anyways, and they still say that somehow, at some point in some obscure dialect, lung lakara was used in this way. And it's not just Indians that do this. It's the Western scholarship as well. You'll see this in various Sanskrit readers. People will still say this. And this goes for lit lakara as well. Pāṇini's rules for lit lakara are that it must have happened a day before, and you must not have witnessed it. Here, Pāṇini at least makes an attempt to show the actual usage of lit, which is a common past tense in the third person and only the third person. But this unwitnessed stuff is just complete bullshit, again, because texts have completely ignored that precept as well. You see in the Ramayana phrases like Mam Uvacha. Mam Uvacha just means he said to me, which is in direct contempt of Pāṇini's rule here. And the reason why the Ramayana uses this phrase is because it doesn't care about Pāṇini's rules. These rules didn't standardize in Sanskrit because they just didn't exist. Pāṇini is again prescriptivizing here. He's making this rule up because this is how he feels lit lakara ought to be used rather than how it is used. But that's just the past tenses, right? Surely he hasn't made any other mistakes other than the past tenses. Well, you have to look no further than his rules for Shatra Pratyaya, Shatra and Janat Pratyaya. The rules for these pratyayas are in direct contempt of reality once again. Now, Pāṇini's rules here state that you can only use Shatra Pratyaya to replace Lat Lakara, the present tense, if it's not in the first case. It cannot be in Prathama Vibhakti. And he goes on to list a bunch of exceptions to this, but he is very clear that in general, you're not allowed to use it in Prathama Vibhakti. Now this rule is so ludicrous, so just completely schizophrenic, that even his number one fans, Pāṇini's number one fans, his commentators, have to reinterpret the rule. Now, of course, they can't say he's wrong, even though he is. You can't say he's wrong in Pāṇinian grammar because it's heresy to say that the grammar god is wrong. But they just simply try and reread the verse in a way that allows for usage in Prathama, even though it just doesn't make sense. It's very clear what Pāṇini means. And he's very clearly wrong here, because every single text, again, every single text in all of Sanskrit literature uses Shatra Pratyaya in Prathama Vibhakti. But according to Pāṇini, saying a sentence like aham kurvan is somehow just completely wrong and in contempt of his grammar. So again, he is wrong. And not just Shatra Pratyaya, you can also go look at his rules for Kwasu Pratyaya. He says that this is a Vedic affix, and that it only exists for 3 verb roots. However, the Mahabharata doesn't care about this and uses Kwasu Pratyaya for a various number of roots. It uses Chakravan, Jagmivan. If I remember correctly, the 3 that are allowed for use in the Ashtadhyayi are Shushruvan, Ushivan, and Siddhivan. But the Mahabharata uses Chakravan, Jagmivan, what else does it use? Tasthivan, yeah. And you see forms like Tasthivan as late as Kalidasa. Even Kalidasa uses Tasthivan willy-nilly. Not willy-nilly, but somewhat commonly. And this goes to show, again, that Pāṇini does not know everything, and that he did make mistakes in his grammar. Will anyone say that this rule is just wrong? No. For some reason, people are just averse to saying that the Ashtadhyayi is wrong. And even though it is a useful text, I will give you have to recognize that it is not a fountain of truth. And it's not just grammatical affixes, it's for things like plutam as well. Pāṇini is convinced that plutam is somehow a classical Sanskrit phenomenon, even though it is purely Vedic. You do not see plutam ever in classical Sanskrit, yet Pāṇini has so many rules that say that it allegedly is in classical Sanskrit. There is zero attestation of this. He says that accent is in classical Sanskrit, but the accent system he describes is a post-Vedic accent system that clearly diverges from the original Vedic accent, and therefore he must be at a time when accent no longer is in common speech. Yet he insists that normal speech uses his accent system. He goes on to say that the Atmanepadi Ashirling forms, like Edhishishta, forms like that are classical even though they aren't. They are only found in the Vedas. The only time you find this type of form is just once in classical literature, and that is a quotation of the Rig Veda. This is a Vedic form, but Pāṇini still insists that it's somehow a classical form. And doubtless there are so many more forms and rules that are super wrong. It's just that I do not know of them, and they are too hidden in the depths and folds of the Ashtadhyayi for me to know of them. But I at least hope that this video has convinced some of you that Pāṇini is wrong, and that he has made mistakes, and it's not just his dialect. It's most definitely a problem with the Ashtadhyayi.